Hello everyone, I'm the person who made the page. Okay, so we have a Michael Jordan fan who wants to go on. He's from YouTube. He goes by the YouTube username of Be Distinct. He has Michael Jordan as the number one player of all time, and he would like to explain why Michael Jordan is the number one player of all time. So let me put him on. Hey, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, you're welcome. So you have Michael Jordan as the number one player of all time. Feel free to explain if you like.
Well, Jordan, he checks all the right boxes, man. I mean, when it comes to the attributes of scoring, winning, teamwork, defenses, making other players better, I don't think anybody checks those boxes all of those boxes more efficiently than Jordan. Now, you may have other players that were more pronounced in different areas than Jordan, but as far as checking all the boxes across the board, nobody else did it like Jordan.
Well, that's what you claim, and lots of Michael Jordan fans claim things like this. But there are lots of players who check lots of boxes, and you can make the point there are other players who check the boxes just as well as Michael Jordan.
Well, I wouldn't even call it the modern era. I would say since, really since, if you want to call it the implementation of the NBA or even before that, nobody's really accomplished what Jordan did, the way he did it.
What do you mean?
Who's won 6 championships
besides
me now? I don't have any trouble with somebody saying that Bill Russell would be the number one because of what he's accomplished. But when I look at Bill Russell and I look at Michael Jordan, for instance, when I say that Jordan checks all of the boxes, Jordan could have done what he did in his time, what he did in his time, in his era. He could have done what he did in Bill Russell's era, and he could have done what he did in today's era.
Maybe. You have no idea to know that, but a lot of Michael Jordan fans like yourself assume these things to be true. Not only do you have no way of knowing this, you could make the same point about other NBA legends. They could do what they did in different years too. Yeah. And just to give you a quick reference, Wilt Chamberlain, a guy who played in the NBA, who's a Hall of Famer, who knows his NBA, he basically made the point that if Michael Jordan played in his time and played the same kind of way where he was dunking and showing off, that not only would he get knocked to the floor, but he'd be put on the bench then.
Well, I'd make an argument against that. Well, not an argument against that, but as far as being knocked to the floor, that's happened with Jordan. As far as the shots being put up, I looked at now Jordan has taken, from what I've seen, out of all the top 10 players, Jordan has taken the most shots, but
the top 10 players?
He was not. Yeah, my list of top 10.
Okay.
I think he took at least 3 more shots than Jerry West per game, 3.5 more shots, something like that, close to 4 more than Kobe. I think he's taken about a little over 4 more shots per game than LeBron James has.
Oh, LeBron James came up.
Yeah.
I make a joke like that because lots of times Michael Jordan fans bring up LeBron James.
Yeah. Well, LeBron James, I think he's, 3rd or 4th of all time. So, his name's going to be brought up a lot.
3rd or 4th all time.
In the future. Huh?
3rd or 4th all time. What on?
Points. As far as Michael Jordan is concerned, when I look at, the things that he did, and he was knocked to the floor. The Pistons made the Jordan rules. Not only the Pistons, but the 76ers were pretty rough with him. The only thing that you can argue that I think is that, if Jordan would have not under today's game, I think today's game, he would have shot more and scored more. But if you go back in time, maybe, Jordan would have taken less shots because the game was formatted so much differently during, especially Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain's era.
And maybe
You
he would
know,
have taken more shots. We have no idea what would happen. I mean, my point basically is number one, we don't know, and number two, you can make the same kind of points for other players that they would do well during different years. And then I guess a third
right?
point, there are people who basically feel like if a guy like Michael Jordan or anyone else, it doesn't have to be just Michael Jordan, goes back in time and does the kind of things that they do, they wouldn't be the same player. They wouldn't win as much because there's just different reasons. I mean, in those days, they didn't like it when people show off. The rules were different. They wouldn't have the same equipment. There's more things, but you get the point.
Of course, yeah, and I think that the most effective argument is, forward. Your era and forward. Like say for instance, Bill Russell. I think Bill Russell would have been, a perennial all. Let's just say Bill Russell comes into the league the same time as Jordan, not Jordan. I'm sorry, Magic and Bird. I think Bill Russell would be a perennial powerhouse. He would help teams win championships, because of the fact that I don't think people understand. And the reason I say Bill Russell, as far as dominance, is the closest thing to Jordan, is because, he beat a team with Wilt Chamberlain, and he had these two guys. Wilt Chamberlain had these two teammates. You may know their names, Jerry West and a guy named Elgin Baylor. The Celtics, they were a strong team, but I believe that, with the trifecta of Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, and Elgin Baylor, the fact that, that a Bill Russell-led team was able to dominate that trifecta,
Yeah, but I don't really.
that's definitely something to be said. That, yes, Bill Russell would have been a powerhouse. And if he would have played, basically in the 80s, started his career, but I don't think he would have been that singular dominant force, that black hole that just sucked the life. When you win 11 championships in your career, that's unheard of. That'll probably never be done again. But as far as Jordan, I don't think anybody, and the reason I say, you never know what could have been done. Let's look at today's.
Well,
game.
let me just get in. Let me just get in real quick. So I don't really do it that way where you go, Bill Russell beat this guy, beat this team. I don't really do it like that. It takes a team to beat another team, which you did pretty much explain that part later on. But I also don't agree with this thing that Bill Russell wouldn't have dominated as well in a different time. I mean, again, you don't know that. And again, the same point could be made for Michael Jordan. I just don't think these kind of things makes sense. A lot of these kind of things usually are only brought up by Michael Jordan fans. They think like this about how one guy beats another guy and this guy couldn't do as well in a different year and Michael Jordan might do as well in a different year. It's these kind of things. They're just people making things up.
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily that's necessarily true. Like if I said that, without, just any comparative analysis, okay, Jordan's, the greatest. If he would have in let's just say if he would have went to the past, he would have, for sure he would have broken Wilt Chamberlain's scoring of 100 points per game. I just say,
sure.
No, I'm just saying if I wasn't making any type of analysis. So that's what I'm saying with Bill Russell, and I say the same thing with Jordan. I think that Jordan, his talents, more than any player that I know of, would have translated into a form of greatness, in any era. Now, would he have been the same Jordan if he was 30 years older as he would have been in his, during his era, or if he was 20 years younger? Of course the changes would be there because the game changes, and things of that nature. But I think more than any player that's ever played the game, I think that Jordan's greatness, because you have a lot of players that could probably fit in any era. They will be average to good in the era they played in. They will be average to good in an era of the past. They will be average to good in today's era. But when you talk about great players, I think that honestly, the player that would be the that wouldn't change at all. As far as doing, as far as being, having all of their, if you want to call it, checking all the boxes that wouldn't change, whose game is universal throughout time, to me, is Magic Johnson.
Okay. So I'm still trying to understand. Are you saying? I just want to make sure I understand. Are you saying that Michael Jordan, out of all the players, he would dominate the most if he went to different years compared to any other star?
Any other star, I think that his greatness and the way he played would have dominated, would have translated more. In other words, I think that Magic Johnson's, the skills that he had, I think that they fit into any era better. You know what I mean? But as far as dominating, checking all of those boxes and all of those X factors, I think that Jordan's would have, translated more than any star.
Based on what, though? How do you know that?
I mean, he had all of the attributes. He checked all the attributes, all around game, defense.
You've explained. Okay, go ahead. Defense.
Yes. Okay. Defense, and a lot of people, they just mischeck that defense. Leadership.
You think Michael Jordan was a good leader, man?
Well, I think he was a leader. Well, I think he did what needed to be done. I think that a lot of, I think that, and people heard those stories, I don't think like that, they didn't even mention everything, even before the documentary came out, The Last Dance. You hear things like he threw a ball and bounced it off Scottie Pippen's head. What's he, but I heard, there were a few players that acted like that.
Yeah,
now,
but
is it right? Is it good?
But that's the thing. So the things that you don't know for sure that Michael Jordan would be the number one guy who would do better than anyone else compared to all the other stars if he went to different years. You don't know that, but you're explaining it like you know it. And whatever reasons you have so far, you gave defense and leadership, and I'm sure you have more. But pretty much any reason you give that is possible for another player to do, you don't know that Michael Jordan would be the number one guy over all the other stars if every star went to a different year or years. And some of the things that so far that you listed, defense and leadership, you could apply those things to other stars. There are other stars who played defense and had leadership.
Right. Yeah. And what I was, trying to convey is the fact that when you look at, Jordan, and the thing about, let's take Jordan, and again, when I compare, Jordan, when I say that Jordan's the best player, I compare it to my top five, and you can even extend it to the top 10, and when I say that, what separates really, Jordan and Bill Russell, it was the fact that they played, but it was also, the fact that they just understood the fabric of basketball.
Lots of players do this thing. So how do you know Michael Jordan's number one player of all time? I know you explained that he checks the boxes and he has these things.
Right.
But how do you know that he checks it more than any other star? How do you know he has these things more than any other star?
Well, from what I've observed, and again, I remember, I start remembering, I may be giving my age, but my remembrance of greatness starts with Bird and Magic. As far as Kareem, I remember the end of his career. He was out of his prime, and Bill Russell and Wilt, of course, the legend, it kept going even, before the days of YouTube. People would talk about Bill, Wilt, and others. But what makes Jordan, in my opinion, the greatest of all time is that he was the only player that I witnessed, even to this day, to play the game like he wanted to play, and
What do you mean?
It got to a point. I mean, he pretty much did what he wanted to.
Lots of players do that, man.
Yeah. You have a lot of players that do that, but what separates, when I say that, there are a few players that understand the matrix of basketball, they got to a point where other teams did what the Bulls wanted them to do. And
That's a team thing. You're not ranking the top team of all time. You're ranking the number one player of all time.
Well, I'll put it to you like this. The '94 Bulls couldn't do that. And I don't think if Jordan, and honestly, when Jordan wasn't 100%, when he didn't have his basketball legs back, he didn't have a feel for the game, neither did the '95 Bulls do that.
Okay,
but once Jordan became Jordan again.
But again, everything you're explaining that Jordan did this, he's the man, you're saying it like it's true, but you're not proving it. And again, you can make the point for other stars. Other stars are the man, and if they were off their team, the team may not be as good then. So why, again, does Michael Jordan become number one? Why is he the guy that goes over all the other guys?
Well, I don't know many other players that, that when they're on the team, you not only win, but the stiffer the competition gets, the better the player gets, and the more dominant the player gets.
You're telling me you really don't know.
Hold on. No, I didn't finish. Not only that, but you finish the stiffest competition off every time you face them on the highest stage in less than 7 games.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense because number one, there's a lot of stars out there. There's a lot of stars out there.
There were no stars that did it 3 times. Okay, 3 times.
We don't need a history lesson. We know what Michael Jordan did. We know what NBA players did. Well, my point is when you're going.
I didn't get to finish.
No, but you're giving very long, detailed answers. You have to give me a chance to follow. Some of your answers are going to different places, and you're not really definitively proving things. And let me show you some things. He never lost in the finals. His will to win. He just had all the check marks. There's lots of stars out there who do these things that you list for Jordan, and how people just play him so tough, and they get better and better as time flies, and they're always winning when it, not always, but they're winning when it counts the most, and you're ignoring the times Michael Jordan lost. You're acting like he just keeps getting better and better, and he keeps winning, but he lost a bunch of times. And then you go, well, he never lost in the last stage. Well, how can you lose in the last stage when you don't even get to the last stage? So he lost before that. And what you guys do is you cherry pick. You guys selectively pick and choose what you want to go by just to help Michael Jordan. And then when the other stars get into it, you go, well, there's a reason for that star. There's a variable for that star. So you always have an excuse. But for Michael Jordan, it's just Michael Jordan.
No, not really. Not really. And the reason I say that is because, Jordan, like say for instance, okay, let's look at the guys that accomplish a lot. You look at Kobe, you look at Magic, you look at Bird. Yes, they had great champion. I mean, they had great runs, right? But when you look at a lot of the greats, they had what I call the hilltop, or where they went up, they peaked, then they went back down. Now, some went down further than others. Some went down faster than others. But I mean, Jordan's was a steady climb.
He lost a bunch of times. Okay. What do you mean, man?
Yeah, but but I mean, he had a Pippen. He needed a Pippen. I mean, yes, Jordan was a great player, but everybody needs somebody.
Sure.
I mean, Jordan had if a Pippen would have developed earlier, either would have come into the league,
we're doing what ifs and maybes. There's lots of what ifs and maybes for lots of stars.
But again, Jordan, he won till he walked off.
Well, he
You
also
know, we saw the last dance.
he also
Yes,
no.
he lost, but he lost against some of the greatest teams of all
No, but
time.
you're just making my point. You just made my point. I told you earlier, just whenever another star does something, there's always a reason and a variable. But when Michael Jordan does something, it's just Michael Jordan's the guy. So other stars lose, other stars win, and they lose to nice teams, they lose to whoever. But when Michael Jordan loses, you make sure you let people know that he lost to all-time nice teams, as if he's the only guy.
No. When I look at Jordan, Jordan needed the philosophy of Phil Jackson, and he needed a player like he needed a perennial player like Scottie Pippen.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, and he needed somebody to do that dirty work, either Horace Grant in the early days or Dennis Rodman. That's all he needed. When I say that's all, I mean those are the anchors.
I get your point. You're making the point that he needs a squad, just like any other star.
Right, but what I was alluding to with Jordan is that nobody once he got to that point, nobody did it as success. Because the thing about Jordan is that the Pistons are a great example.
Mm-hmm.
Once everything got anchored, he never looked. It's not like
that's not true.
He just got better and got over the hump.
That's not true. He lost. He lost. One of the reasons he retired the first time, he explained that he retired because he was burnt out. Now, when a guy wins 3 rings in a row, 3 years in a row, teams get tired. This is a very common thing. There's reasons why teams don't win so many rings in a row, because they get tired. Injuries happen. They're just not as into it, whatever. He explains he gets burnt out. You can't assume that if he kept playing, he would just keep winning and winning and winning when he tells you he's burnt out and he retires. If the man retires, then you can't act like, well, once he started winning, he was always on top. Especially when he actually lost in 1995 and he lost in Washington. And he lost before that.
Washington, he lost.
And he lost before that. Before he started winning, he lost. You just can't discount everything. He lost. And it's, you know what, by the way, I'm not blaming him. It's not his fault that he lost. I don't put it on 1 star for winning, and I don't put it on 1 star for losing. You Michael Jordan fans do this thing where you guys act like one guy wins, and even though you guys know it's a team game, I know you know it's a team game, but you still elevate him like he won. He didn't lose. Not winning by himself, and once he was winning, he just stopped. He didn't lose. Like, it's not boxing or wrestling or golf or tennis. It's not one guy winning and one guy losing. It takes a team to win the NBA Finals.
True. And I understand exactly what you're saying, and Jordan, he said he was tired. I know in the documentary where they talked about after the 92 season, he said, I forgot the reason why, but he said he would have retired after the 92 season if not for a certain instance. Jordan was, people forget, man, the early Jordan, before he was winning the championships, was putting up damn near 50, between 55 and 60 points a game, especially when they got to the playoffs. He put everything upon everything into trying to have his team win. But like I said before, but like I said just now, Jordan needed that perennial player to play alongside of him, and he needed the coaching philosophy of Phil Jackson, for him to elevate, to his maximum potential.
Oh.
And it kind of shows when he came back for the second 3 championships. He was a different player. He relied on the fadeaway. He was much more efficient with his energy. He'd get the ball and turn around and do a fadeaway. He wasn't going to the basket as hard and as much as he was during his first 3 championships.
Okay.
And I've always said this. I've said, people, the closest thing that we saw, and people said this, and I agree, that we saw what Jordan did was not from necessarily Kobe Bryant or LeBron James, but it was from Kawhi Leonard. what he did with the Raptors.
Well, let's get to
I,
Michael Jordan being the number one guy. We don't need to. I mean, go to those other things. So far you've given some
but
reasons.
I try to bring a point. I think my circles are long, and I try to, I make one point, and it may drag on a bit sometimes, but I try to bring it back to Jordan when I make these examples, because just with Kawhi Leonard, and people say that was the closest thing that they've seen since Jordan. I certainly agree. I know that when people were witnessing the NBA Finals from last year, and of course Durant went down. That played a huge factor in the championship series with Golden State. But as far as a player on the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, pretty much, controlling the pace of the game, scoring efficiency, things of that nature. I think that, when you look at Jordan, that's what Jordan did, to everybody. But he did that over a period of 6 years. Well, not 6 years, but once he figured out, how to play the game in its totality, whether it was the mental, and people forget that. I think that Jordan got in a lot of people's head even before they stepped on the court. They're like, and surprisingly, they say that, Jordan was was one of the best trash talkers. So I think that controlling the pace of the game, and I have no doubt in my mind that Jordan would have done the same thing that Kawhi Leonard did, if he was playing in today's game.
Okay, so just to make sure. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I know we can't extrapolate and say, okay, this person would have done this and this person would have done that. But when we look at the way that Jordan done it, he's one of the few players that, yes, he took that retirement break, and once he came back, you can tell he didn't have the same legs that he had before, but mentally, he'd grown, and especially during the second three championships, they were, it was almost like not only are we going to execute our game plan when we have the ball, but we're going to execute our game plan by making you do what we want you to do when you have the ball. So, that's one of the things that we haven't seen many people do. Kobe was a dynamic scorer.
Do you mind if I get in, man? When he's at top, he never lost, and he figured it out the most, and everyone like wanted to play hard against him, and he was like the best leader. I know you didn't say the exact words like that, but these are like everything is just Michael Jordan. It's like, do they not know Michael Jordan? It's like other stars are leaders to win, who put up good, nice stats, who kept winning over and over, who were rusty, who were tired, who maybe wanted to take a break and they didn't. I mean, this can be applied to so many stars, but what you guys do is you separate everyone else like, well, yeah, that guy did it, but there's a reason. And that guy did it, sure, but there's a variable. And that guy did it, yeah, but there's an excuse. And Michael Jordan? No, he's just the guy. Why is he so different from everyone else? That's what I'm trying to understand, why you guys think this way. The things you're bringing up, these kind of things can be applied to other stars. And you explain Michael Jordan's rusty, why not just stop and conclude maybe the Orlando Magic team was better than the Chicago Bulls team then? And Michael Jordan put up really nice numbers. Are you sure he was rusty? And there's more points about that, but I want to be fair to you.
Okay, yeah, and again, I know that other stars did, things that even Michael Jordan didn't do. I do understand that, but you cannot, when it comes to one of the biggest factors is the end result. I remember now when Jordan won the first three championships, there were many that didn't consider him the greatest of all time. You know,
But actually, there were some who labeled him the greatest before he even won one NBA Finals.
true. That's true. That is true. You know, but I specifically remember and recalling not only on the television, but people at the time, especially those who witnessed the prime Kareem, prime Wilt Chamberlain. They witnessed Bill Russell. George Gervin, Oscar Robinson. I would hear now because during the first three championships, you'd hear those names. And they, Jordan, it wasn't as pronounced. Now, it was still pronounced that, okay, Jordan was the greatest, the media was saying it, but I'm talking about people, everyday people.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying that Jordan, you say Jordan, and it was like, possibly, because you got to recognize at that time, Magic had won more championships than Jordan. I think Bird had won the same amount. So, you still had players that were even playing that had more chips than Jordan. So it wasn't until that second three-peat, like, man, this guy did not only break or no break. This guy not only three-peated once, but he did it twice.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, tipped the scales to say that he's the greatest.
Well, it tips the scales for Michael Jordan fans, man. But for the other NBA fans, most of the Hall of Famers, most of the scouts, the experts, and including Michael Jordan himself, explained that you shouldn't go by rings to rank players then. I mean, you again, this is the thing with you Michael Jordan fans. You guys know it's a team game. I know you know that. But if you know it's a team game, one guy doesn't win by himself. Why would you rank one guy over another guy based on how many times him and the team wins the NBA Finals?
Well, if the team structure is similar throughout how it was done, let's say, for instance, if Jordan would have won one championship, maybe two championships with that team that he had, right? And then all of a sudden you bring in 2-3 more superstars, and he wins 6, maybe 7. Okay, and you say, okay, Jordan, he won those first 2, but man, to get those other 4, 5, man, those other guys, that's what put him over the hump.
But as you know, everyone needs a squad to win. Nobody is going to win it by himself.
Everybody needs a squad. Right. Everybody needs a squad. But Jordan had the same team structure throughout his career.
Well,
he had Pippen, he had a shooter.
But when you say structure, the teams are not the same. The second three-peat is not exactly the same team from the first three-peat. And even every year when teams win, the teams are not exactly the same. But the structure was the same.
What
was that?
The team structure was the same.
Okay, but so whether the team is the same exact team or a totally different team, it doesn't even matter, because if a team is good enough to win, then they're good enough to win. So you put it on, Michael Jordan and the team that wins. But why act like this guy is better than this guy based on how many times he and the team wins the NBA Finals?
Finals, it's not the hear-all, say-all, but it's the ultimate indicator.
Okay, some Michael Jordan fans act like rings is all that matters, but you're not one of them. You made the point that finals is not everything. That's basically your point, and I understand that. But still, that's one of your things. And what a lot of Michael Jordan fans also do is they explain that some explain rings is all they need. Okay, some explain rings is not everything then. But even if it's not everything, then why is it still one of the things? It shouldn't even be there.
Yeah. No, it has to be there. When you get to, not only are you playing more games and exerting more, but especially, it's the factor of being driven to win.
What do you mean?
Because when I say driven to win, I mean, like say for instance, I'm going to take it back to these other players. You have to. Okay, let's look at Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. You know why I have Bill Russell ahead of Wilt Chamberlain? Will Chamberlain is arguably the most dominant force with the ball in his hand. As far as scoring the basketball, as far as rebounding, playing the ball, Will Chamberlain was probably the most dominant force of all time. But mentally, he came up short.
Well, that's what you explain.
When it came to Bill Russell.
That's what you Michael Jordan fans explain, but you don't know that. And I'm sure if Wilt Chamberlain was next to you, he wouldn't agree with you. And I'm sure a lot of his teammates wouldn't agree with you.
Well, it's been said, and this is the thing about Bill Russell was dominant, but the scary thing is he could have been more dominant. It's been said several times, and Phil Jackson alluded to it.
If you're going to act like Wilt Chamberlain wasn't there, for the whatever, he wasn't as good emotionally or whatever, that kind of thing, you don't know that. I doubt Wilt Chamberlain would agree with you. I doubt a lot of his teammates would agree with you. And whether you're right or wrong, it doesn't even matter because you don't know who's more tougher emotionally or more there, whatever, more stronger emotionally, whatever word you want to use, these kind of things when it comes to ranking players. So this is one of the things that you guys do where you guys act like Michael Jordan's will to win, and then you guys downplay someone else, but you don't know these things. You guys are just making things up.
I can see how people, that you may have talked to in the past and made things up, not make things up, but, when we have our biases, we tend to lean towards certain things and we tend not to see certain things, but when I was alluding to Bill Russell and Wilt, I was about to quote certain things, that was said, and not only from a standpoint of observing Wilt, but things that Wilt, said, and they kind of,
No, I'm sure you have information. No, I'm sure you have information where you can pinpoint some things and go, here's some evidence. But there's a couple of problems with that. Number one, you don't know that it proves something. You're just cherry picking things. And number two, you're ignoring the other things that he does. So when he's balling out, sweating, putting up the numbers, getting the records, you can't just dismiss all that and go, well, I don't know about his mentality compared to other stars. And then number three, you can cherry pick things from Michael Jordan and find things where you can question his leadership and his how he is as a team player. And hey, what about his toughness? I don't criticize him for retiring. I don't criticize him for retiring. But if you wanted to do the same thing that you're doing, couldn't you make the point that he just quit when he was in his prime, when he was winning, because he was not mentally tough? I'm not telling you that's true. I'm not explaining that's true. Right. But if you're going to be fair, couldn't you do that? Imagine if Wilt Chamberlain retired when he was in his prime, or LeBron James retired when he was in his prime, or Bill Russell retired when he was in his prime. Don't you think Michael Jordan fans would have gone, oh yeah, they're in their prime, they retired, they quit? And what if Michael Jordan never quit? Don't you think Michael Jordan fans would have been like, he never quit, he kept staying in there? That's my point, that you guys find ways to tear down other legends and tear down other eras and have a variable for other stars, but when it comes to Michael Jordan, he's just the guy.
Oh, no. I wasn't tearing down Wilt. What I was about to say with Wilt Chamberlain is that it was, people were saying that because Wilt, he knew how strong he was. He made, several times he said he benched over 600 pounds. I think Shaq was the closest to that benching form, I think maybe close to 5. But, people who played with Wilt and things of that nature, Wilt would often say, as far as being rough and strong, he said he didn't want to hurt anybody.
What's wrong with that? That's a nice thing.
Wilt Chamberlain could have been much more dominant than the fact that Wilt Chamberlain is probably the most dominant player of all time, and he could have been more dominant because Phil Jackson was asked one time, okay, if you would take Shaq or Wilt, he didn't give an answer, but he said the same thing that was quoted several times. That
I know that video. I put that video on my page.
Bill Russell didn't. So the fact I'm not tearing it down, but what I'm saying is that the fact that whether it's the era of play or whatnot, the fact that okay, I'm dominating this much, I mean, do I really want to make everybody look like kids here? But I think that the fact that he didn't do that,
But again, when the guy sweats and tries hard and has the numbers to back it up and has the records, you can't dismiss all that and act like it wasn't enough. Now, you made a point that maybe he could have been more
here's
done.
the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. If you don't do that and it costs you championships, possibly. Not, if you say, okay, I'm this dominant, and I could be more dominant if I do this, but I don't really want to hurt anybody.
Well, he has to hurt,
whatever the case may be, or just make his.
He has to hurt
not
people
hurt
for
anybody,
you to feel like he's more dominant than?
No, not hurt people. That was a quote but basically, dominant being, much more aggressive. Like say for instance, that was what that footage that you saw with Phil Jackson that you said you had. He was basically alluding that Shaq attacked the rim with reckless abandon.
I disagree. I'm the one that put that video on my page. I know that interview very well. Now, if you took that video that way, I mean, I can't tell you you're right or wrong. That's how you took it. That's fine. But when I played that video, I didn't take it like that way. I took it as he basically didn't bluntly pick one guy, but based on what he explained, this is what Wilt did, this is what Shaq did. If you put it together, it seems like he picks Wilt Chamberlain. And anyway, even if you disagree, again, if the guy has the stats and the records, you can't just dismiss all that like it wasn't enough. And even if you're right, let's say you're right, it wasn't enough. You don't know what different, I mean, do you think he would have won more rings? You don't know. We don't know these things. You just have to take it for what it is.
Imagine being a player that's a cross between that you can do what Shaq did and do what Kareem did.
Yeah, that's Wilt Chamberlain.
Imagine being that player.
That's Wilt Chamberlain. That's probably Wilt Chamberlain right there.
Right.
Let's go by the bottom line. When the guy is having the stats to prove things, he's scoring, he's rebounding, he's playing minutes, and there's more, but you get the point. And when he has the most records, and he's considered by you and others the most dominant player. What about all that? Why does all that get put to the side? And then we go, well, he was finesse, and maybe he wasn't as tough, and maybe he could have done more things like that. And in your Phil Jackson point, by the way, just so you know, Phil Jackson was also asked, who would he start his team with if he was starting a team? He didn't pick Michael Jordan. He picked Bill Russell. And he was also asked, who would you pick between Michael Jordan and Shaq? And he didn't bluntly go, this guy. But when he explained it, it seemed like he would pick Shaq. If Shaq was on his
I think that was the one I was alluding to.
Okay.
I think that was the interview I was alluding to.
He basically made the point that the difference is if Shaq makes his free throws when he started to make them. So on that point, it seems like he would pick Shaq.
Yeah. And just alluding to, like I told you before, even at how Wilt Chamberlain plays, he was still the most dominant force with the ball, of all time, in my opinion. But again, that makes my argument is the fact that there was that roadblock named Bill Russell.
It's basically Bill Russell and the squad.
Bill Russell and the squad, and Wilt and the squad. Right. That's what I'm saying. So the fact that that Wilt per se, he played more finesse than he could have.
I don't know. I don't know
that.
I don't know that, dude. I mean, do you know that for sure? I have no idea if he played more finesse than power, more finesse than whatever. And even if you're right, what does that prove? You can make the case for lots of players. What if?
Right. That's correct. Yeah, just like Wilt Chamberlain and his team. But I think that in that interview, if you said that Phil Jackson said that if there was a team and the player that he would start it around was Bill Russell and not Wilt, there's a reason. So that's why I said when I say Jordan is the number one, he checks the box. Okay, he has that winning attribute of Bill Russell. Okay, he can score points in his manner, maybe not in a dominant fashion as Wilt, but he can check the box for Wilt. And he checks other boxes. He's almost like, if you drew blood from these greats, and you made a player, in my opinion, that's what Jordan is. He may not be in full capacity of what these players were, but he has those attributes that comes out, and made him, one of the most dominant players of all time. I mean, listen, break or no break, it was 18 months, and he didn't have the same legs that he had before.
I mean, do you know his numbers, man? Do you know his numbers?
Who, Jordan's?
Yeah, you're talking about, you're referring to 95, right? Or no?
Well, 95, his numbers, okay, when we talk about his numbers didn't tend to come back up until the end of the season. He had good numbers
So let me ask you, if the Bulls would have won in 95, what do you think Michael Jordan fans would have explained? You know what they would have explained? They wouldn't explain that, he wasn't good enough. They would explain, look, everyone, even when the man returns, he still won. Even though he played less games, he still won. Even though he was rusty, he still won. So that's my point again. Michael Jordan fans just always find a way. Maybe I didn't explain this, but they always find a way to make Michael Jordan the number one guy. If he wins, hey, he's still the man. If he loses, hey, he was rusty anyway. You just can't win with Michael Jordan fans. It's always a way to make him the number one guy. And did you ever think this, man? Did you ever think that maybe it actually helps him to have less games? Because when you have less games, you don't have to go through the long season, the grind, you're more fresh and things like that?
No, not if you're rusty. No way. No way. I mean, even if his numbers were good, what I had been saying is he figured out the matrix of basketball. So he loses to the Magic.
He figured it out.
He loses to the Magic in Magic in 95, right? But then he comes back and he beats that same team by one of the largest max.
Like, you're acting like when you say he figured out the matrix and he came back and beat them, again, you guys are acting like it's one guy who's playing wrestling or boxing or golf or tennis. It's the squad. The reason he lost in 1995, it's not his fault. It's because the team they lost to the other team. When he came back the next year, it wasn't just that he figured it out and he beat them. They had a different team. They had Dennis Rodman, for example. This was a team that won 72 games. This was one of the best teams of all time. Some consider them the best team of all time. But you guys act like it's Michael Jordan.
I see what you're saying. True. Yeah, those Bulls teams were playoff teams. It's a proven fact that those Bulls teams without a Jordan on it, it was a playoff team. It was at least good enough to get to the playoffs. Maybe not win, maybe not get far. But yeah, that the Bulls team is a playoff team without Jordan. That's been proven. You can actually go, you can look that up. I believe 54 wins, something like that. Over 50 wins.
Oh, you're referring to when he left the first time?
No. 94 Bulls.
Yeah, when he left the first time.
When he left the first, 54 wins, I believe.
Or I think he left in 90. Whatever, he left in the first year. Like, basically, just to make sure, whatever year he left, 93, 94, I think it was, and then
93.
You're just to make sure, you're referring to that the Bulls are still a playoff team when he left, and if he wasn't there, they'd still be a playoff team in the other years.
No, I was alluding to when you said that, the squad that he had. It's just not Jordan, but it's the squad. And I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. But there's a big difference between being a playoff team, and getting to the playoffs and losing in the playoffs and going 3 years in a row and not letting your opponent get to a seventh game in the championship series.
That's a team.
That's a team
thing. That's a team.
Right, that's a team. But that's a huge addition. That's a huge, something. If you say, okay, you don't even know the situation, and you just look at a team, you don't even know if it's the Bulls or Michael Jordan. Just to say any sport, and you say, okay, X and X team, man, they won 3 championships. Okay, this team, this year, okay, they had a pretty good season. They won, yada yada. Then you see the next year, okay, they had a pretty good season. You know, they went to the playoffs again, you know, pretty good. Then you see 3 more championships. Now the game 6. I think you out of all of those seasons, you win the championship seasons. You win over 60 games, except for two of those 6 years. And you say, okay, what's the difference between?
Let me guess, it's
these
Michael
6
Jordan.
years that they win championship, huh?
Let me guess, it's Michael Jordan.
I don't know how else to explain. What would it be?
I mean, it's a team, man. It's a team. But
It's a team.
if you want to do
It's a
that,
team.
but if you want to do this thing where it's like the difference is Michael Jordan, if you're doing that, I want to make sure. Are you doing that? I'm guessing you're acting like the difference is Michael Jordan.
No, I'm saying that yes, it's a team sport. I'm basically alluding to the fact that Jordan had a good team behind him, and yes, that was the factor in them winning those 6 championships. Because prior to him having a good team, you know, he would put up 55, 60 points and still get swept. So yes, the team is the foundational factor of him winning and good coaching. That's a fact. You know, but what I'm saying is that, okay, that good team is a playoff team, okay, or that's capable of getting to the playoffs, okay, but that team is not capable of winning multiple championships in dominant fashion.
Okay, so couldn't you make the same point for any team? If you take off any star player, they may not have the same chance to win?
Yeah, but okay, let's just say, what player do you say? Okay, if you take you take that one player off the team, you know, that doesn't have at least 2 other perennial all-stars.
Or why is that the criteria?
Okay.
I mean, just any squad. Whenever you take your star off the squad, they don't have the same chance to win. Now, you can make the point that maybe some teams would do better, maybe the chemistry is better, maybe they just play better, whatever. But generally, on any squad, you take a star off the team, you don't have the same chance to win.
Yeah. Well, there's a difference between saying, right, you don't have the same chance to win, but, you know, it's not the same as saying, okay, you take a star off the team, you know, and they're an average team, you know, have a winning season, chance to win the playoffs. You know, you have this other star player, you know, he contributes to the team. They have a good season. You know, they make a run at the playoffs. They lose in the first round, you know, quarterfinals, semifinals, whatever the case is. Compared to a player that says, okay, you know, you put this player on the team, he's going to win you 6 championships.
Are you saying Michael Jordan? Are you saying Michael Jordan is the number 1 team player of all time?
Nope. I'm saying he's made the biggest impact of him not being on the team than any other player in franchise.
How do you know that? What do you base that on? What is it about Michael Jordan over every other star that he makes his team the biggest impact of all time? And if he's such a big impact, why didn't he win every year?
You need all the attributes to mature.
Right.
You know, like I said, the 3 attributes, you know, that I think that had to fully mature concerning the Bulls. Michael Jordan himself, the team around him, the coaching philosophy. Once those 3 matured, then, you know, they were the juggernaut.
How do you know when
how
do you know when they matured? You're just assuming that because this is the year they won, now that's when they matured. What if they matured in 1990, but the other team was just better than them?
Well, here's the thing about all 3 of the attributes didn't mature at the same time. The last attribute to mature was, I think synonymously, it was Michael Jordan and the coaching philosophy. They kind of merged. And the last was the team via Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen. Once Jordan and the coaching philosophy and the team via Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant, once all of those 3 attributes got clicking, you know, that's when, you know, they went forward and never looked back.
Yeah, but
You
they
didn't have Michael Jordan
lost.
on the
They
second three.
lost in 1995.
But they didn't have that. They didn't have that third attribute.
See,
They didn't have the rebound, and Jordan didn't have his
but
legs.
that's the point. So you can make that point for anyone. Yeah, everything has to be on page for them to win. That's true. You're right. So you can say they didn't have this guy, they didn't have this guy, they didn't have that, they didn't have that. But you could do this with any star. I'm not even saying you're wrong. Any star, you can go, well, this is why this team didn't win. Well, this is why this team won. That's why that team won. That's why this team didn't win. But why do you guys act like Michael Jordan is the number one star over all the other stars when it comes to things like this, as if he's just so different from everyone else? What's the difference if you take Magic off the team, if you take Bill Russell off the team, if you take Larry Bird off the team, any other star you take off, that team doesn't have the same chance to win.
Right. Now, and that's true. And again, in my opinion, Jordan is the number one because I don't think that, like if you look at all of those teams, right? Especially during the early 80s, man, the 80s period, those mega teams, the Pistons, the Pistons, the Lakers, and the Celtics. I mean, if you take Bird off, yes, they don't have a chance to win, per se, but it's still a good team, and they're probably
going to
make a run to the semifinals at least to face the Pistons.
And you could say that you could make the same point of the Bulls. When you take Michael Jordan off, they could still win. And in fact, as you know, when Michael Jordan left the first time, they won lots of games. And they went
to the playoffs, but
they went to the playoffs.
They weren't even I'll put it to you like this. They went further when Michael Jordan first came back. He didn't have his legs or whatnot. But when Michael Jordan first came back, they went further than what they did without him. In 94, 95, they went further than 93, 94. 93, 94, they were a playoff team. 94, 95, they were a playoff team. They get to the quarterfinals, and as we all know, they lose to the Magic, right? But what I'm saying is the fact that, okay, those, if you look at the greats, yes, they do fall off, but with the exception of, like I said before, like I've always said, Bill Russell, I don't see where, okay, you got a chance for them chips. The championships, I know people say it's not everything, but it is especially once you get to winning three, at least, multiple championships. Once you fill up a hand, once you fill up a hand with rings, you can't just say, okay, why are you counting championships?
Sure you can. Why are you counting championships? Because one guy doesn't win by himself. You need a squad to win.
Right.
George Gervin, Allen Iverson, John Stockton, and a bunch of people, it doesn't make sense to tear them down because they and the team didn't win the finals. They're not going to win the finals if they don't have a team to win the finals.
Yeah. But it's saying that, okay, Jordan had this attribute, and Jordan did this that was more pronounced than the others.
Oh,
I don't think that's not tearing them down.
Okay, let's find out. Let's find out.
Not tearing them down.
Let's find out. What did Michael Jordan do over all the other stars that ever played in the NBA, including the ones who won the NBA Finals? What makes him the number one star over all the other stars when it comes to the game?
Yeah. Well, when we started the podcast, I gave my reason, and the reason was he checks all of the boxes. Now, in the boxes that he checks, it's not the most pronounced. So when I say, okay, this is what Jordan did, okay, you look at Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson, like you said, Allen Iverson he was dynamic. Had probably the greatest crossover of all time. Scored like everything else. But at the same time, he was like,
just one thing. I know why you're bringing up Allen Iverson because I think it's because I brought up Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
Okay, but I don't want to. I don't want to.
Or George Gervin.
No, but I don't want to.
You know,
If we make it about one guy versus one guy, it would take forever because there's so many guys. So
right.
just to go to a bigger point, just for practicality, how do you know that he checks the boxes more than anyone else? I think you explained he may not do it as better than anyone else in all the boxes, but you're making it seem like he checked the boxes and as if he's the guy who's over all the other guys. How do you know that?
You got to step on that court. You know, this isn't just theoretically, you know, a theory. You know, when he was on that court, you know, he checked, you know, defense, understanding team ball. Okay, some people say he wasn't the greatest teammate, but, you know, players played, and he made sure that you played to your fullest when you were on the court with him.
Lots of players play to the fullest with other stars.
Yes, they do.
There's other guys who are better leaders and better team players. Like, for example, Magic Johnson. I'll tell you what, if you're going to play with anybody, you want to play with a guy like Magic Johnson, and you want to play with him before Michael Jordan, and you're going to give it all your all for him, and give it all for Kareem, and give it all for John Stockton, and lots of players. Then again, how do you know Michael Jordan? Like, basically, you're listing things from Michael Jordan, so I understand the things you're listing, but how do you know those things check him off and make him the number one guy over all the other stars?
Okay, I mean, I've said it, you know, a few times. You know, I've kind of, as far as, you know, why I think Jordan. So, I guess me asking you, what do you see? First off, in your opinion, where do you rank Jordan as far as being among the greats?
So, just so you know, if you're asking me, let's say, who's the number one player of all time, my answer is there's probably no such thing, and if there is, we'll probably never know. There's just so many variables, so many things, so many details. There's no way to know for sure. The closest thing to know is statistics and records, and even that's not 100% reliable. Basically, when people rank players, they're going by whatever they want to go by. And if you don't go by statistics and records, you're going by things that are less reliable. And things like, you know, like for example, rings or analytics or awards and will to win, etc., etc., etc. These kind of things are just people making things up. There's no way to know for sure who's the number one player of all time. Now, just so you know, man, you can make the point there are players who are better than Michael Jordan. So I still want to know, even though I know you've explained it more than once, but you're not proving it. You're just going, he checked the boxes. Here's what he did. He played defense. He's a leader. Okay, but how do you know he's the number one guy over all the other guys?
Well, it's just like, you know, unless it's a one-player sport, even then there are debates, you know. So you can't really, I guess if you want to call it, submit in something that's subjective, that's opinionated. You know, you can't do it, you know, but you know, when I say that Jordan's the best, you know, it's just that the attributes of dominance, he has them all, and he has them all as far, in my opinion, he has them all, you know, the most attributes that resulted in the most sufficient results.
You want to prove that?
You know, if you want to say.
Can you prove that?
You know.
Because you can make that point
for other.
Yeah. You can make that point for other stars. Other stars have lots of attributes, and they win. Yeah,
and they win. That's true. You know, but you know, when I look at the MVPs, the scoring titles, you know, and the championships, you know, when you're looking at, especially with the team sport and impact, you know, that's who I have as, you know, as number one.
But what you're doing is you're cherry picking things that he did and he accomplished it, and you're going to sprinkle a little bit of this, sprinkle a little bit of that, sprinkle a little bit of this, and you put it together as if you know that he's the number one guy. You can sprinkle things from other guys who have scoring titles, rebounding titles, minutes played, and there's more, but you get the point. And you could make the point that they're better than Michael Jordan. And some of the things you're bringing up, like awards and things like that, you shouldn't rely on these things. They're just what people vote for. People just vote on things.
Yeah, it's all subjective. subjective. I mean, we could sit here and we can talk, you know, and you know, if just say by happenstance you have a podcast with somebody who's in their 80s, they're gonna have a totally different.
Sure. By the way, on that note, if I'm going to rely on people, I'm going to rely on older people. Older people know more. They have more experience. They've been around longer. There are more older people in the Hall of Fame who have witnessed the older players and Michael Jordan and players after him. And most Hall of Famers don't pick Michael Jordan. I don't know what they think somewhere else, but on record, there's no record of most Hall of Famers picking Michael Jordan. And I think that's important because it's like, if it's so obvious that Michael Jordan's the number one player of all time, wouldn't most of the experts pick him? Not the people on the fans, the people on TV, the people who love him, the actual experts. And why don't most Hall of Famers pick him? So, for example, if you're going to ask people, who do you think is number one? Do you want to rely on the people who were there or the people who were not there? You know?
Yeah, the people who were there, of course.
Right. So how do you explain that most Hall of Famers are not on record for picking Michael Jordan?
Yeah, well, again, they have the advantage of actually witnessing impact. Like, you know, I could imagine that. Let's just say somebody who's in, you know, up in, you know, an elder, you know, a true elder, you know, late 80s, 90s, you know, who grew up, you know, watching Bill Russell. You know, I mean, how does an individual that wins 11 championships for one franchise not cement his legacy as being the most dominant force that probably the NBA has seen, you know, as far as drive and winning, you know, with those attributes? You know, you probably can't change that because of what they've experienced. You know, like I talk to young people, right? You know, and, you know, when I say young people, I mean people in their early 20s, you know, and, you know, a lot of them, you know, some say Kobe, some say, but, you know, when you think about it, LeBron James started going to the championship in 2007. You know, and he's been, 9, 10 times to the championships. And so all they know and all they've seen is LeBron James, you know, going to the championships and sometimes winning.
But haven't you kind of done that too? Because from what you explained, it seemed like you know more about the players from the 80s on after that, and you picked Michael Jordan.
Hey, and that may be, like I said, it's subjective. That I'm giving my read, and that may be the case. You know, if I'm from a different generation, you know, 2, 3 generations back, you know, and the thing about it is, I didn't witness Will Chamberlain. I didn't witness Bill Russell. I didn't witness Oscar Robertson. You know, I have witnessed Michael Jordan. I've witnessed Kobe Bryant. I've witnessed LeBron James. You know, so yes, from Jordan on, that's what I've witnessed. You know, from Magic and Bird back, you know, I don't have much remembrance of.
So then, how do you know he's the number one player of all time? And I know you kind of acknowledge that maybe you're doing that kind of thing. So I like that you're respectful enough to acknowledge that. So I'm just wondering, why are you changing it now? Do you no longer rank him as number one player of all time, or do you still rank him as number one player of all time?
Well, again, in a subjective analysis, I would say because of what I've witnessed and because of, you know, the results of his career, it's among the best. You know, I have him as my number one. Okay,
so then, is that your favorite, or do you think he's the number one player of all time? Sometimes what Michael Jordan fans do is they'll go, in my opinion, he's number one. He's my guy. And then I'll go, is your favorite? And they'll go, no. It's just my opinion. I pick him. What does that mean? Like, you know, like either he's the number one player of all time or he's not. Now, if you go, he's your favorite, that's different. If you go, of all the players I know, he's number one, that's different. If you go, he's number one based on the players from the 80s after, that's different. But if you go, he's the number one player of all time, it would be nice if you proved it. And then also, what happened to your whole thing about you acknowledging that there are people who don't know the past players, including yourself?
Yeah, and that's human nature, to rank, because ranking is part of organization. We're structural creatures. We build structures. We organize things in a certain manner. We, everything from how we count to how, the days of the week.
A lot of humans do that, but a lot of humans also prove it.
Yeah. Well, that's in any sport. That's any list. You can have the argument for any and every list, even individuals. Like say for instance, individual sport. Like let's look at the Mike Tyson factor. Another Mike. Like Mike Tyson, to me, I have him as, I think as far as the greatest boxers of all time, I have him as number 6. That's 5 or 6. And you know why? You know why I say that? I have him as 5 or 6 because you have other players who held the championship belt for much longer. They have more wins. They've accomplished more. Mike Tyson had that year and a half where he just, where he held the belt, and different issues, but he was at that peak for such a short period of time that I can't compare him to Muhammad Ali. I can't compare to Lennox Lewis or even how Evander Holyfield or others held the belt for much longer and accomplished more. But I think that Mike Tyson is the second best on his best day. I think the only person that could have beat him on his best day was a prime 67 Ali who could punch moving backwards and moving away from you, and also had a jaw granted. So I say, I'm like, man, is Mike Tyson the greatest of all time? He may not have the, is he, he's one, he's one on one attribute, he's the, he's here on my list, but on other settings, he's much further up on my list. So when I look at Michael Jordan, I say, okay, he may not be the greatest, like you say, okay, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? Greatest scorer of all time. Well, has the most points of all time. So if you say, okay, who's the greatest scorer in basketball history? Well, guess what? Jordan isn't in my top 2. And you can make an argument that, since Karl Malone is ahead of him and then Kobe Bryant, is Jordan the greatest scorer? I can't like with the stats. I can't say that Jordan's the greatest scorer in NBA history. You got Wilt Chamberlain. You can debate, probably say Wilt Chamberlain or Kareem. Have at it. You'd be pushing it because you don't have anything that there's too much contradictory to say, okay, Jordan is the greatest scorer of all time in basketball history. Don't think so. I don't think that he's the greatest scorer of all time. I think he's, in my opinion, he's the greatest basketball player. So, when you're talking about all of these attributes, again, it's subjective. You can say that, okay, even though Wilt Chamberlain is the greatest, he has the most points, is he the greatest scorer of all time, or is it Wilt Chamberlain? So, these lists are subjective. Jordan is my favorite. I was alive to witness his prime. 40 years from now, another may come along after, because it's been Kobe, it's been LeBron, and somebody's going to come along, somebody else is going to come along, so.
Hey, please subscribe, and if you disagree with me on something, you can go on my program and show me your facts on whatever you disagree on. If you want to go on, let's set it up. Send me an email. The email is right there in the description section. Thank you.